Let's take a short break, and when we return, it will be time to speak with our guest of the day, Ajuri Ngelale, Special Assistant to the President on Media and Publicity. Tonight, we're discussing federal government's consumer credit and education plans. Please stay with Politics Tonight. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with the program. President Bola Tinubu, during his inaugural address on May 29, 2023, spoke of his vision of a credit economy as a panacea to corruption. He had stressed that the good life that Nigerians deserve should not always be immediately paid for in cash. So in December 2023, the Presidential Council on Industrial Revitalization formed technical and regulatory working groups comprised of NICA, that's the National Institute of Credit Administration, Central Bank of Nigeria, National Identity Management Commission, and the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. These groups, amongst others, have come together to develop a framework to improve consumer credit in Nigeria. So tonight, let's speak with Ajuri Ngelale, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, who will be giving us a comprehensive insight into what this initiative means for Nigeria and Nigerians. Ajuri, thank you so much for joining us this evening, sir. Good to have you again.
Good evening to you, my sister. Thank you for having me.
Right. 2 weeks ago, you gave a hint on this, but tonight it's interesting for us to have this conversation so we can have a full understanding of this initiative. I know President Tinubu had been a big advocate of consumer credits. I remember as far back as 2016, the president made it a key highlight of his remarks at that year's edition of the Bola Tinubu colloquium in Lagos, where he charged bank executives to begin to rethink consumer credits in Nigeria. But for Nigerians, especially poor Nigerians, this is a welcomed initiative that will cater to the desires of some Nigerians to buy things that they want on credit. So please talk to us about this.
You're absolutely correct, especially in noting the fact that His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu campaigned around this country, in all parts of this country, with a central promise that not only would he reform and recalibrate the national economy, but he would do so in a way that would enhance financial inclusion and that would bring the prosperity that only a very tiny, minute percentage of our population has enjoyed over decades to the broad masses of our people. And a central mode through which he would deliver that is the establishment of a national consumer credit system. Let's be clear about how this works, why it has not come into the kind of the national economic picture before now, and how, under the leadership of Mr. President, we are now able to do so. So, first of all, I think let's take a keen look at the fact that up until now, there have been several barriers to a fully functional consumer credit system in the country. You have a situation in which we have not had a centralized register, a database that would enable lenders, that is banks, of different sorts, both traditional banks, microfinance institutions, to be able to determine the credit worthiness of every Nigerian citizen who is coming to them seeking, a credit facility. So we know that we have to deal with that. A major part of dealing with that is appreciating that if you have over 100 million working Nigerians, we have about 102 million Nigerians who have effectively, applied for and received their national identification number. We recognize that that's a starting point, because if you're going to, ascertain the credit worthiness of an individual Nigerian, you first of all have to be able to register the identity of that Nigerian in a database that can be linked to other databases that would give you a full view of that individual when you are considering a lending decision or the credit worthiness of that individual borrower. So dealing with that, we start with the NIN number. We recognize that the national identity, the NIN number, the NIN number is going to be the singular and primary identifier of every Nigerian borrower within the new consumer credit architecture that is being established by this president. That's number one. Number two is appreciating that if you are a bank, you are having a Nigerian with a bank account, right? BVN number, NIN number, all in tow. They are going to, apply for, consumer credit, obviously through, Credit Corp. That is the Consumer Credit Corporation, the Nigerian Consumer Credit Corporation that is now led by Managing Director and CEO Engineer Uzoma Nwagba. All right. Now, once you register, what is now going to happen is you're going to be in a pool where you can now be essentially eligible to go through a process that would allow you at the end of the day to access a credit facility from a bank that is working with Credit Corp that you would have originally registered with. I hope I'm being clear about how this works. It can get a little convoluted, so I want to take my time with this. Now, in the initial phase, we have phase one, which has already started, which in effect allows our people to go to Credit Corp's website. That is, and I want to be clear, it is CREDICORP.NG, creditcorp.ng. If you go there now, you will see a tab on the page that says register now. You click on it, fill in the blanks, all the information, and you will now be registered to join that pool of those who will be able to access consumer credit through our partnered banks when that process fully kickstarts well before May 29th. The deadline on that registration process for that phase one is May 15th, 2024. So between today and May 15th, 2024, eligible Nigerians, right? Nigerian citizens, if you have a NIN number, you have the data that is being requested of you on that website when you register there before the deadline, and you'll be eligible to access credit as phase one kicks into implementation over the next few weeks or so. So we want to be clear that this is going to be a phased approach. We're not simply throwing something out to the entire country and expecting it to work on day one. We're being very systematic and very pragmatic about this. We're beginning with an understanding that a major part of our problem as a country, in terms of our development progress, has been the fact that the civil service and the federal and state bureaucracies have often been manned by individuals who are facing an economic system that essentially asks them to find millions of naira for rent, to buy a house, to buy a used car or a new car, to buy household appliances, and for several other uses. You find that when a civil servant, for example, is in that situation, the natural tendency is to find money by any means outside of their legitimate income, which is why you now have issues like corruption and fraud within the public sector that had become rife and unfortunately a part of our national reputation over time. That is something we're working to reverse. This is a major part of reversing that. How this is going to work is that because we understand that if we can get due process right within the federal and state bureaucracies, and we can get contractors receiving all of their funds without having to pay kickbacks to civil servants who are in desperate need of resources because an economic system tells them they have to pay for everything up front, then if they now have access to affordable credit and access to cars, houses, and all of the various things that they would require to make their lives better within the ambit of their legitimate incomes, they're not going to be in a position to aid and abet corruption at every given turn, as we've seen over the last several decades. So the president is pragmatically focused like a laser in phase one on our civil servants, both at the federal level and at the state level, ensuring that they are able to not only register but access consumer credit to take the burdens off of them in such a way that we can have some level of normalization and regularization and standardization within the processes affecting, value for money and contract execution, whether it's in the roads development sector, rail development sector, agriculture, housing, and all of the other sectors of the economy that depend on a public bureaucracy at the federal, state, and local levels that actually function well. So this is the phase one priority of the president. Now, let's also be clear that over the course of the next few months, while civil servants will be, kind of the first beneficiaries of this process predominantly, we are working very assiduously to ensure that it's opened up to the entire general public by the beginning of next year. That is first quarter of 2025. But by May 29th, we will be able to convey to our people the number of beneficiaries that will be benefiting from the initial pool of registrants in phase one. So this is how it's going to start, and this is how we're moving forward. Now, on to the more technical issues. If you are a borrower, all right, because we're working through banks, the credit corp is not going to be a retail lending institution, meaning that you are not going to go to a credit corp branch, for example, to obtain a credit facility that will allow you to pay your rent. That's not how it's going to work. Credit corp is going to be a kind of a big brother institution to the traditional financial institutions we know, the deposit money banks that we know, the microfinance banks that we know. They're going to be in a position where they can provide two major forms of lending in the beginning, right? On the one hand, they're going to be providing guarantees. Guarantees essentially of finance to the deposit money banks in the country, the major generation banks that we know. They're going to basically say, okay, you have this many registrants, those who are in the portal, on the Credit Corp portal, who are interested in consumer credit, right? They are obviously account holders within your various banks, okay? They have BVN, they have NIN, they have all the things that they need to be able to access this credit after they've registered on the Credit Corp website. Now, essentially, what Credit Corp is going to do is the banks will say, okay, we might be a little strapped because we have, for example, 1 million people looking for, credit facility, right? And they're saying, well, we can actually only handle, 500,000 or 750,000 of those, credit applications. Credit Corp is now in a position to on-lend. Sorry, this is actually wholesale lending. They're in a position to essentially on-lend a quantum of funds to the bank, the bank that is partnering with Credit Corp, to ensure that those who are in the waiting line, who have not yet been given their credit facilities because the bank is a little bit too strapped to provide the credit facility to all of the applicants that have accounts within that bank, they can now say, okay, we will give you, whatever it is, 20 billion or whatever the case might be, to ensure that we satisfy the demand within that bank. So it's a big brother institution that's going to ensure that the credit system is functioning the way that it needs to, and that it supports the retail banking industry to be able to support these facilities in a way that does not encumber the Credit Corp institution with too much additional responsibility and bureaucracy, so that their functions are streamlined, it's clean, it's clear, and there's not any kind of convolution with respect to their functions, with respect to how they engage with other stakeholders in the financial system, including the banks. Now, with guarantees, they're also going to provide certain guarantees. In addition to the wholesale lending, which is additional cash, they're going to be providing guarantees. So essentially what that means is, if the bank says, we can lend to 100,000 individuals, right? But we have questions about 30,000 of these individuals, or 40, out of 100,000, 40,000, or whatever the case may be. Credit Corp is in a position to now say, okay, we understand your concerns. It's on the basis of this index, that index, or this criteria or that criteria. We understand. What we will do is we will provide a guarantee to ensure that any concerns you have about this borrower, right, as a lender, we are ready to step in and ensure that if that credit facility goes bad because that borrower has in some way defaulted in the system, we can now provide you a guarantee to ensure that you don't carry the liability, we'll carry the liability as Credit Corp. That's how that works. Now, the natural next question for a Nigerian citizen listening to me right now would be, well, wouldn't that make, credit core potentially prone to abuse. Because if you're providing guarantees for individuals who are not being covered by the banks because of one reason or the other, then why should we cover that? Now, this is why it's important to now understand the financial architecture and the technological architecture that we are building to undergird this new credit system. What we are doing is, by using the NIN number, we are now going to create a new, in the United States of America, you have what's called the FICO score, right? Essentially, it's a score that is determined on the basis of certain criteria that is based on your credit worthiness, that is based on, previous transactions you've made that are tied to your national identification number or social security number, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in Nigeria, instead of a social security number, it's going to be the NIN number as the singular identifier. So what's going to now happen is we're going to now be able to tie what used to be very loose strands of information and data to a NIN number, tether it together, so that when an institution like a bank, for example, is looking at the application from a borrower, a Nigerian citizen who wants to borrow, they can see not just the NIN number, but the NIN number, the BVN number, and other data that will come up as a result of the technology we are introducing to link their borrower history to their BVN and to their NIN number in a centralized credit registry / database. Okay, so essentially what it means is we'll be able to say, look, your NIN number and your NIN number is tied to an account with the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, for example. And we can link your payment history, right, which is increasingly automated, with your NIN number to see that your payment history with AEDC, for example, is either positive or negative. Are you a faithful payer or are you not a faithful payer? We'll be able to see that. We'll be able to look at, for example, your telecoms records, right? If you have a subscription with MTN or Glow or any other, we'll be able to get a sense of not just your cash flow, but a sense of the frequency with which you are able to opt in and opt out of various packages and subscriptions to give us a sense of your payment frequency, number one, and then your cash flow. Now, the second point I want to make on this, and this is very vital, is that this is not going to be based like previous attempts in some parts of the world were based on incomes, right? We're not saying bring us an employment letter, right, that says, TVC is paying this amount of money per month into your account, and so therefore, this is what we believe you can repay. We're not looking at salaries and incomes and employment letters in that way anymore. That is not the defining criteria. Because we understand that 90% of the population is not working in a corporate organization or in the public service, where you have an employment letter and a fixed salary and a pension, emolument, and all these things that are fixed. But 90% of the population is working in the informal economy, right? These are micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. These are people hustling on the street. What we've been able to do is say, look, if we're going to touch people's lives, we can't tie the credit system to incomes and just the formal economy as we know it, the white-collar jobs, the public sector, and the law firms, and the telecommunications companies, and the banks, and all these people that make up less than 10% of the working population. We have to tailor it to the 90% of the population that's not in the formal economy, in the white-collar and formal economy. How we're going to do that is basing our credit decisions on the premise of cash flow and not income. So we will be able to look at your BVN, for example, and determine what is the frequency of cash inflow and outflow, right? What is the median income on a monthly basis that we can say over the last 5 years, on average, this is what this person is seeing in terms of their cash flow. This is what this person is doing in terms of their expenditure profile. When we look at that, we can now say somebody who has an average monthly inflow of 200,000 naira cannot come to a bank or through Credit Corp, right? And now request for a 50 million naira loan to build a house that their income clearly cannot support, right? So we're able to use the cash flow to determine and define the scope of whatever credit facility that we're going to provide to them. So that's how we're going to ensure that there are not abuses in the system with respect to the level of credit that should be granted to each individual borrower. But on the other question of how you're going to have accountability, it is going to be based on the fact that we have all sorts of strands of data from telecommunications companies, from utility companies, from other sources, right? And we're going to be able to tie this information in an automated system to your NIN number. So we have any lender, that is a traditional bank, microfinance bank, or even credit corp as an institution, as the big brother kind of overseer, they can input your NIN number with the new technology that we're putting in place and have a full insight into what your history is with other institutions, whether you're creditworthy or whether you're not creditworthy. And if you are creditworthy, we can now determine the scope of credit you should have, how much you should be borrowed to you on the basis of your cash flow that we can identify through a technological means. That is the level of what we're talking about with respect to the architecture of this program and why His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has really been diligent in taking his time to build it out the right way and phase it in the right way, starting with a public sector that has been riddled by corrupt practices. If we can regularize and ensure that our public sector, actors and officials, obviously in the bureaucracy, are able to access affordable credit, we believe we're going to be able to tamp down corruption very early on in the first phase as we move into the general population.
All right. Quite elaborate. I mean, in the last few minutes, you've addressed some of the major challenges, substantial hurdles in accessing credit, some of which are stringent eligibility criteria, high interest rates, identity-related challenges, and fragmented data sources. But, I mean, given the current state of the economy and the strong push by the government to revamp it, how strategic or timely do you consider this initiative in the recovery of the nation's economy?
This is going to be the foundation stone. This is the bedrock of modern economies. Even in emerging markets, let's leave the U.S. and some of the Western European countries and China. To GDP, these are countries that have not only doubled their GDP. If you quantify all of the funds and resources that make up their national credit systems, right? The flow of money through their credit systems. It is more than double and triple of their actual GDPs at that level. But that is not where we're starting at. We're not starting trying to be the U.S. or China. We are starting with a pragmatic view of where we are and where we need to get to. Now, the question is, where are we when it comes to this? When it comes to the actual Naira and Kobo that we're talking about. Right now in the country, we have about 35 trillion Naira, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, in what we call a credit ecosystem in the country. That is not necessarily consumer credit. This is all forms of credit. This is, the disparate strands of MSME borrowing that we see where somebody, a guy who owns a street side, kind of credit institution or a credit company, I would say. Basically a company that on a very small scale, he'll say, look, I will lend you 10,000 Naira. But by this day, you're going to sign a contract with me that you're going to bring back 12,000 Naira. We have hundreds of thousands of such very micro credit enterprises that Nigerians have started out of their own entrepreneurial spirit, right? So it is a conglomeration of those, that constellation of small credit, facilitation, credit facilitators with the large scale credit facilitators when we're talking about traditional and microfinance banks that make up the 35 trillion that make up the Nigerian credit ecosystem as it is today. Now, the challenge we have had is recognizing that for Nigerians to feel the impact of a nationwide consumer credit system, to feel that you can actually walk into a bank after registering with Credit Corp, for example, and get a credit facility for a mortgage or for, a used or new car, for example. To get to that point, it is clear that we have to get to about 50% of GDP in terms of the quantum of resource that would comprise our national credit ecosystem. Right now, we're at 35 trillion. The GDP is not 70 trillion, meaning that we are not at 50% of GDP. To get to 50% of GDP today, we're looking at about 176 trillion that would need to be cycling through our national credit system to get to about 50% of the working population in the country being able to access credit. That is our target. Now, our target to get 50% of the entire working population in the country accessing consumer credit for housing, vehicles, and the like is for 2030. But what we are focused on is ensuring that we can even beat that timeline. What the president is all about is he's saying, we do not want to overpromise and underdeliver. That is his mantra. That is his motto. That is his ethos. He says we will underpromise and we will overdeliver. That is his way. So what we are doing is we're saying 50% of the working population at the outset, we want to have access, full access to consumer credit by 2030. Of course, we're going to beat that projection. But now the key is we need for Nigerians to feel like there is a credit system that they can actually benefit from on a mass scale, all across the country, all categories of our population. We have to get to half of GDP to be the level of finance available in the credit ecosystem, which is 176 trillion, as against the 35 trillion that is present currently. Now, how we do that is the 35 trillion I've mentioned is not tied to any credit data registry. It is not tied to any type of centralized database where you can have a unified view into the borrower base of the country, those who will make up the borrowers of the credit, the citizens with the NIN numbers and the BVNs and the like. We don't have that. Right now, it's people who don't even have bank accounts, BVNs or NIN numbers at all, who are able to just on the street side say, look, I'm going to sign this contract with you. I'll put my phone as collateral. I'll put this as collateral. And then when I bring back your 12,000 naira on the 10,000 naira you're giving me today, then everything is okay. That's how they're doing it. That's the 35 trillion we're talking about when you combine that with the traditional and large-scale borrowers in the country today. Now, for us to be able to regularize that, to standardize that, to unify that into a centralized credit system that is running the way it's supposed to run for everybody to access it affordably and in the way that would enable them to, access the good things of life that we are promising our people, it's going to require 176 trillion. Now, how we're going to do that, first of all, is we're starting with, like I said, the public sector in phase one. By the first quarter of 2025, and by that time we would have moved into the general population, we would have been able to take all of these disparate strands of credit facilitation in the country, unify it, right, through various processes, both regulatory, through compliance, through technological, participation and inclusion. We'll be able to get all of that together and obviously tie resources from the Central Bank of Nigeria and from other sources, right, to ensure that we free some fiscal space within these institutions, deposit money banks, microfinance banks, and the like, to be able to steer that money toward the real sector. That is, steer it toward, the industries that will be benefiting from this consumer credit system, because you now have a national pool of demand that you've created by millions of new borrowers that have been, essentially made possible and brought into the inclusive formal economic system, banking system as well, by virtue of the establishment of this consumer credit system. So we have to get to 176 trillion over the course of the next few years. Currently, we're at 35 trillion, but we have no doubt that by the time the money is able to, by the time we're able to unify that credit registry and everybody has a single window, people have NIN numbers that will allow us to show their level of credit worthiness. And by the time we are pegging borrowing to cash flow and not salaries and letters of employment, what is now going to happen is we're going to unlock, the barriers to credit facilitation for tens of millions of Nigerians who never went to school, for example, who never previously registered for a NIN number, but now have an incentive to register for a NIN number and eventually a BVN because they want to access consumer credit. Right. This is going to be the bedrock, ultimately, of the future of our economy.
Right, great conversation, and I'm sure Nigerians cannot wait for this to finally kick off. But let's take a break, and when we come back, we will continue this conversation. Please stay with Politics Tonight.
Every major news story is with many perspectives and layered with different levels of impact.
Hello. What time did this happen? We will be right there.
At TVC News, we follow the big and major news, gathering the facts, witnessing the outcome.
I am here live at the aftermath of the approval of the new national minimum wage.
We are TV Station of the Year, not just for breaking news, but for being first, fair and accurate. TVC News, first with breaking news.
Every weekday on Business Nigeria, we uncover the secrets of the financial world,
breaking down intricate economic and financial matters.
We analyze the stock market, shares, bonds, and the thrilling world of cryptocurrencies.
We unveil and analyze complex policies of the CBN and other government parastatals as they affect your everyday life, keeping you a step ahead every time.
Okay, this is good. Facts matter. Our team dives deep to separate facts from popular opinion.
We simplify complex government policies as it impacts your everyday life, helping you navigate the ever-changing financial landscape.
Watch Business Nigeria every weekday at 2 p.m. only on TVC News. First with breaking news.
Welcome back to Politics Tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for staying with us. Tonight, I've been speaking with Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale. And tonight, our conversation is centered on the President's move to recalibrate the consumer credit system in Nigeria, as well as education plans. Thank you so much for staying with us, Ajuri. Now, in the last few minutes, let's talk about education. The Tinubu administration will be exactly 1 year in office come May 29. I want you to talk to us about what the federal government has done to overhaul the education sector.
Thank you so much, Jumoke. Just if you could just grant me less than 1 minute to tidy up on this credit system. There's something very important I want to mention. Because Mr. President wants to strengthen the value of the national currency, he has also put in a stipulation that we are going to be giving through the credit corporation, the Consumer Credit Corporation. We're going to be giving to the banks, traditional and microfinance banks, a condition that basically says for every Nigerian borrower, we are going to sweeten the terms of their credit facility, right? That means lower interest. That means potentially longer moratoriums, longer payments of repayment, and the like. We'll put some sweetener on the terms of any borrowing that is tied to a purchase of a made in Nigeria product. I want to repeat this. The president is putting in place a mechanism to ensure that every person who is creditworthy, that leverages on the consumer credit system to access a new car, a new house, and other goods and services, right? If they are borrowing to purchase a made in Nigeria product of any kind, they will be given better terms on their credit facility, lower interest rates, longer periods of repayment, and so many other sweeteners. I want to emphasize that because the president is determined to strengthen the national currency and also promote local industry and Nigerian producers across sectors, across the board. I thought that was important to mention. Now, on to the issue of education. This is fundamental. Obviously, even if you have a national consumer credit system that functions, even if you have infrastructure on the ground, railroads, airports, seaports, power plants, dams, and the like, these things are good. But if you do not have a well-educated, well-prepared population, then you're going to undermine, you're going to put a ceiling on your ability to grow over the long term in a knowledge-based global economy. Now, what has the president done? That's your question. The answer is that the president has put in place what is a revolutionary new federal education overhaul that is not the kind of myopic federal education policy we've seen in the past where federal administrations essentially treat education as some sort of sector where we leave states to do what they want to do, and then we do something that we think will work at the center, and we hope that all of it will just somehow magically work together. The president is a wise man. He was a subnational administrator and now president, so he understands the importance of creating that handshake across sectors, especially in education. So what he's done is he has established the new DOTS program. The DOTS program, it stands for Data Repository. It stands for Out of School Children's Strategy. It stands for Teacher Education and Skill Upgradation. And it stands finally the S for the skill development, right? So now let me start with Data Repository. Essentially, the president has approved the establishment of a national education data system, a registry. What that's going to do is it's going to give the federal administrators, federal education administrators, state education administrators, and local government administrators a single window into the state of multiple aspects of the education sector within their various jurisdictions. So let's be practical. It's going to track the current state of the infrastructure. The president has approved an infrastructural census within the education sector, meaning that every school in the country, primary, secondary, tertiary, and the like, all of them will be evaluated and assessed about on terms of their current condition, right? What they have, what they don't have. We'll run that census. What we'll also run is we'll get a clear inventory of every student, both informally and formally, that is in school right now. Those who are registered in a system, those who are not registered in a system. All of them will be collated and put into a national education data system so that we have not just full track of the education infrastructure, but also of the curriculum across the country at all levels, right? Within the various years as our kids are progressing, that there's some level of standardization and unanimity that's created, and then ensuring that we are able to conduct a review of the quality of our teachers in terms of the certifications they have, making sure that there's a level of standardization with respect to their certification and their quality as individuals as they teach our children. So this data repository is going to be a single window that will be available to all tiers of government, all seeing the same thing based on the census of human and infrastructural needs and requirements that are currently prevalent in the education sector in Nigeria. Now, after the data repository, right, which also deals indirectly with the out-of-school children, because once you can dimension effectively the quantum of students in school, you can get an idea of those who are out of school, right? And then you can now attack that with more accuracy and more definition and specificity. So that's going to help us with that. The third element is obviously teacher quality and training. What the president is adamant about is bringing the states together and saying, look, it's not enough for you to say that you're budgeting 15% of your budget to education or 10% or whatever you're budgeting to education. That's all good and fine, but those are just numbers. If you're putting that in a budget, we need to know that the money you're putting in the budget for the education sector is actually translating not into the pocket of some politician in collusion with a contractor, but it's translating to a school on the ground with top class ICT infrastructure, and other infrastructure that our children need in order to succeed. We have to be able to monitor that process and ensure that funds that are devoted to that sector are being applied properly. That is part of this data repository process, ensuring that we're able to track the developments that are taking place. Not just where infrastructure is now, but where we want it to be over the course of a contract for a primary education facility, for a secondary education facility, for example. Now, in dealing with that, in dealing with teacher quality, we want to put them through new certifications. We want to ensure that we're not simply saying, okay, but because you have this certificate, we're going to not look at you. No. Because some people buy their certificates. Let's be honest about that. So we want to ensure that we want to ensure that everybody is tested, retested. If there are skills that are deficient, we can now upgrade your skills, ensure that you know how to, handle certain digital, technology that will aid and abet the learning quality of that our children are getting. And then once we're able to go through that process, this is a multi-year process, but we've started the implementation of it. Once we go through that process, the final leg of this, and this is very vital when we talk about a knowledge-based global economy of the 21st century, the final leg is the S on the dots, right? The S deals with a national skills upgradation framework. Basically what it does, and this is historic, and that's why I want to take time to make sure everybody understands it. What we're doing is we're not just saying we want our children, like we've been doing for the last 40, 50, 60 years. We want our children to read book, and hopefully if they do well, right, somehow, by reading this book, they understand well, they do well on their exam, then one day they will be lawyer, one day they will be accountant, one day they will be doctor. We're not doing that anymore. What we are saying is that even the child that wants to be a doctor, by virtue of the new national skills framework that we're putting in place under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, what is now going to happen is that child that wants to be a doctor, through the years of very well planned and executed skills impartment, essentially, giving the skills to these children. They might be a doctor, but they're going to be a doctor that's skilled and trained to do several other things, just in case that doctor who runs a medical firm one day decides to get into another aspect of business. We don't want to limit people. We want to open new frontiers for people. So what we're doing is the new curriculum with this new skills framework is going to have a layered approach. What it means is that in primary one, you might learn this skill A and skill B. In addition to the regular curriculum, the history that you're supposed to learn, the math you're supposed to learn, the English you're supposed to learn, your native language you're supposed to learn, your biology, whatever it is that you're learning at that level, we're adding skills to it, practical skills to it, right? So that's primary one. You learn skill A, skill B, primary one. You graduate to primary two. You're going to get skill C and skill D in addition to the primary two curriculum that we've always had, right? Then when you get to primary three, you're going to get skill E and skill F. It's not going to be as the same skills as you learn in primary one and two. The point is that we are going to diversify the learning of our children to ensure that they're not just book smart, right? We want to ensure that they have practical skills, that they can use their theoretical knowledge to now apply to build an economy that is innovative, that is dynamic, that is evolutionary. That is what we're focused on. This is how you build an economy. This is how you build a population of entrepreneurs, of people who are not just looking for a salary, people who know that by virtue of years of training and skills acquisition, they on their own, irrespective of whether somebody's offering them letter of employment or not, they know that they have the skills and the tenacity and the savvy that all Nigerians have to be able to use those skills and create opportunities for themselves and their fellow Nigerians. This is the future of the Nigerian economy. The president understands it, and he is a generation ahead, making sure that a generation ahead of time, that generation is prepared for the knowledge-based global economy that awaits us 10, 15 years down the road, even as we work very expeditiously to reform the current education system so the people who are currently passing through can quickly phase in and benefit from the skills acquisition framework that we're putting in place, not just in federal education institutions, no, but in close collaboration with the local and state governments, ensuring that everybody is on the same page, they're seeing the same data through the single window data repository, and that our policies are aligned in a way that support each other, rather than Bielsa doing one thing, Bauchi doing another thing, Lagos doing another thing. We're going to unify it and make sure everybody's seeing the same picture and everybody's walking toward a progressive direction with unanimity, without any regard whatsoever for religion, region, or faith.
Right, sadly we're out of time. I mean, this is a great conversation tonight discussing the president's move to recalibrate the consumer's credit system, also to his education plans for Nigeria. But before we leave tonight, I would like you to repeat the website where Nigerians can register to access credit facilities, as the deadline for phase one stays as was.
That's very kind and considerate of you. Thank you very much. For all Nigerians wishing to access the consumer credit, you visit www.creditcorp.ng. creditcorp.ng. That is the website. It's up right now. Register today.
All right. Thank you so much. Ajuri Ngelale, Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity. Thank you so much for joining us on Politics Tonight.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
All right. And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But the conversation continues from here. You can watch the repeats broadcast of this episode at midnight and get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke W using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Olajumoke Olataji. Good night, everyone.